You're not overthinking because you think too much. You're overthinking because your mind never learned how to feel safe. And that changes everything. Because if you've been telling yourself to just stop thinking, you've been trying to solve the wrong problem this whole time. Think about this. Your body can be still, your environment can be quiet, nothing urgent is happening, and yet your mind keeps going. It goes back to conversations, replays moments, questions what you said, what you didn't say, what someone might have meant. And it doesn't feel optional. It feels automatic. Almost like something inside you refuses to turn off. But here's the part most people never stop to ask. If there is no real threat right now, why is your brain acting like there is one? Because overthinking is not random. It is a learned response. At some point, your brain decided that staying alert was safer than relaxing. That analyzing everything was better than missing something important. That thinking ahead could protect you from discomfort, rejection, or mistakes. And the problem is not that your brain learned this. The problem is that it never learned when to stop. So now it treats every situation like something needs to be figured out, solved, or controlled. Even when there is nothing left to do. And that is where the exhaustion begins. Not from life itself, but from a mind that never exits problem-solving mode. And once you see this, one question becomes impossible to ignore. If your mind is always trying to protect you, what exactly is it protecting you from? It is not protecting you from what is happening now. It is protecting you from what might happen next. Your mind is constantly running simulations. It takes something small and stretches it into possibilities. What if you said something wrong? What if they misunderstood you? What if this leads to something bigger later? So it goes back. It replays. It analyzes tone, timing, reactions. It tries to find patterns so next time you can respond better, avoid discomfort, stay in control. But here is the problem. The future it is trying to predict does not exist yet. And because it does not exist, there is no clear answer. That is why your mind keeps going. It is searching for certainty in a place where certainty is impossible. And the more it searches, the more it feels like something is unresolved. Like there is one more detail you missed, one more angle you need to understand. This is why overthinking feels endless. Not because your brain is broken, but because it is trying to complete something that has no completion point. And while this is happening, something else is quietly taking a toll. Your energy. Because even though your body is resting, your brain is working as if something urgent is happening. And over time, this creates a state where you are physically still, but mentally overloaded. So now the real question is not why you think so much. The real question is, what is your mind trying so hard to control? It is trying to control uncertainty. Not the situation itself, but how it might unfold. Your mind does not struggle with what already happened. It struggles with what could happen next. It wants to reduce risk, avoid discomfort, and prevent emotional consequences before they even appear. That is why it keeps analyzing. Because if it can understand every detail, it feels like it can stay one step ahead. One step ahead of rejection, one step ahead of mistakes, one step ahead of feeling exposed or misunderstood. But here is where it becomes a trap. The more you try to control uncertainty, the more your brain believes there is something to be afraid of. So it increases the activity. It pays more attention. It scans deeper. It questions more. It keeps you alert, even when there is no real danger. And this is why you feel mentally tired for no clear reason. Your brain is running a protection system that never powers down. Even in calm moments, it is preparing for something that might never happen. And this creates a constant internal pressure. You feel like you should be relaxed, but you are not. You feel like you should let things go, but something keeps pulling you back into the same loop. Because your mind is not looking for peace. It is looking for certainty. And until it finds it, it does not stop. So now the question changes again. If your brain is chasing certainty, what happens when certainty is something you can never fully have? When certainty is something you can never fully have, your mind has only two options. It can keep chasing answers that do not exist, or it can learn to tolerate not having them. Most people never make that shift. They stay in the first option. They keep analyzing, reviewing, questioning, trying to reach a point where everything makes sense and nothing feels uncertain. But that point never comes. Not because they are not trying hard enough, but because life does not offer that kind of clarity. And this is where overthinking quietly becomes a cycle. You feel uncertain, so you think more. You think more, so your brain believes there is something to solve. And because it believes that, the uncertainty feels even stronger. So you go back again, trying to fix something that cannot be fully fixed. And this is why telling yourself to stop thinking never works. Because your mind is not trying to think less. It is trying to feel safe. And safety, for your brain, has been linked to understanding everything. But real safety does not come from knowing everything. It comes from realizing that you do not need to. And this is the moment where something important starts to shift. Not when you control your thoughts, but when you stop treating every thought like it needs your attention. Because once you see that not every thought is a problem to solve, your mind begins to lose the urgency. And that is where the loop starts to break. Now pay attention to this, because this is where most people miss the real shift. Your thoughts are not commands. They are not instructions. They are mental events. But over time, you learned to treat them like something that needs to be answered. Every thought feels like a question. Every question feels like something unfinished. And anything unfinished feels uncomfortable. So you engage. You follow the thought. You try to resolve it. You try to reach a conclusion that finally brings relief. But what actually happens is the opposite. The more you engage with the thought, the more your brain believes it was important. And if it was important once, it should be revisited again. So the next time a similar thought appears, it comes back stronger. More detailed. More convincing. And this is how the loop reinforces itself. Not because of the thought itself, but because of the attention you give to it. And here is the key difference that changes everything. You don't calm your mind by controlling your thoughts. You calm your mind by changing your relationship with them. Instead of entering every thought, you begin to notice it. Instead of solving it, you let it exist without needing an answer. At first, this feels uncomfortable. Because your brain is used to action. It is used to engagement. It is used to trying. But when you stop responding in the same way, something subtle begins to happen. The urgency decreases. The intensity drops. And slowly, your mind starts to realize that not everything requires a reaction. And this opens the door to something that you haven't felt in a long time. Mental space. Mental space does not come from having fewer thoughts. It comes from needing to respond to fewer of them. Your mind can still produce the same ideas, the same questions, the same patterns. But when you stop engaging with each one, they begin to pass instead of expand. Think about how this works in real moments. A thought appears. Something you said earlier. Something you could have done differently. Normally you would follow it. You would analyze it, replay it, adjust it in your head. But now you pause. You notice it, but you don't continue it. And for a brief moment, nothing happens. That moment feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable, because your brain is waiting for you to continue the process it is used to. But when you don't, something changes. The thought loses momentum. It does not disappear instantly, but it weakens. It stops growing. It no longer pulls you deeper into the loop. And this is where real control begins. Not by forcing your mind to be quiet, but by deciding what deserves your attention. Because attention is what fuels your thinking patterns. Where your attention goes, your mental energy follows. And if your attention is constantly pulled into every thought, your energy will always feel scattered. But when you begin to choose where your attention stays, your mind starts to organize itself. Not perfectly, not instantly, but gradually. And over time, this creates a completely different internal experience. Less pressure, less urgency, more space between thoughts. And in that space, something new becomes possible. Clarity. Clarity does not come from thinking more. It comes from thinking less about what does not matter. And this is where most people get it wrong. They believe that if they just think a little longer, analyze a little deeper, they will finally reach the answer that brings relief. But what actually brings clarity is not more analysis. It is distance. Because when you are inside the thought, everything feels important. Everything feels urgent. Everything feels like it needs to be solved right now. But when you step back even slightly, you begin to see something different. Not every thought is relevant. Not every question needs an answer. Not every scenario deserves your time. And this realization changes how you experience your own mind. You stop treating every mental activity as something meaningful. You begin to recognize patterns. You start to see that many of your thoughts are repetitions, not new insights. And once you see that, they lose part of their power. Because you are no longer reacting automatically. You are observing. And observation creates separation. That separation is what allows clarity to emerge. Not because your mind suddenly becomes silent, but because it becomes less crowded with unnecessary noise. And when the noise decreases, the important things become easier to see. But this leads to a deeper realization. If clarity comes from stepping back, why has your mind been trained to do the opposite? Your mind was trained to move closer, not step back. At some point, paying attention to everything became useful. Maybe noticing small changes helped you avoid mistakes. Maybe analyzing situations made you feel more prepared. Maybe thinking ahead gave you a sense of control when things felt uncertain. So your brain learned something very simple. The more you focus, the safer you are. And because that worked before, it kept repeating the pattern. But what was once useful became constant. Now your mind treats every situation the same way. It does not distinguish between what actually matters and what does not. It approaches everything with the same level of attention, the same level of analysis, the same need to understand. And that is where the overload begins. Because your brain is applying a high-alert strategy to normal, everyday moments. It is reacting to conversations, decisions, and small uncertainties as if they require deep processing. And over time, this creates a state where your mind never truly relaxes. Not because it cannot, but because it was never taught how. And this is an important distinction. You are not dealing with a broken mind. You are dealing with a trained mind. And anything that was learned can be unlearned, but not by forcing it to stop. By showing it a different way to respond. And that shift begins with something simple, but uncomfortable. Letting things remain unresolved. Letting things remain unresolved feels wrong at first. Your mind resists it. It tells you to go back, to think again, to check one more time. It creates the feeling that something is incomplete, that something important might be missed if you do not continue. And that feeling is strong, because your brain has been trained to associate resolution with safety. If everything is understood, you can relax. If every detail is clear, you can move on. If every possibility is considered, you can feel in control. But here is the truth that changes everything. Closure is not always something you find. Sometimes it is something you decide. You decide that this thought does not need more of your time. You decide that this situation does not require another mental review. You decide that not having a perfect answer is acceptable. And that decision interrupts the loop. Because the loop only continues when you keep engaging. When you stop feeding it, even for a moment, your brain begins to adjust. It starts to learn that not every thought leads to action, that not every question needs a response. And slowly the urgency fades. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But enough for you to notice a difference. Enough for your mind to feel a little lighter. And that is when something shifts inside you. You stop chasing control. And you begin to experience something much more stable. Peace does not come from having a quiet mind. It comes from not needing your mind to be quiet all the time. Because the truth is, thoughts will still appear. Situations will still happen. Uncertainty will still exist. That part of life does not change. What changes is how you relate to it. You no longer feel the need to chase every answer. You no longer feel pulled into every mental loop. You begin to notice when your mind is trying to take control, and instead of following it, you pause. That pause becomes powerful. Because in that space, you are no longer reacting automatically. You are choosing. You are choosing not to go back. Not to analyze again. Not to turn something small into something overwhelming. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. Your mind starts to learn a new pattern. It learns that it does not need to stay in constant alert. That not everything is a problem. That you are safe even without having all the answers. And this is where real change happens. Not when your thoughts disappear, but when they stop controlling you. So the next time your mind starts to loop, notice it. Do not fight it. Do not follow it. Just step back. Because the moment you stop trying to control everything, your mind finally gets permission to rest.